When we look at history, we tend to fixate on the wars, conflict, and politics that took place over the years, but few take the time to appreciate the different ways people have actually enjoyed themselves. For as long as humanity has existed, people have taken to music, performance, literature, and sports and games in their peacetime and leisure. This video will explain how these forms of entertainment have evolved since the development of agriculture all the way to the formation of the large entertainment industry we see today. This is the history of entertainment.
In prehistoric times, storytelling, usually around a campfire, served religious and entertainment purposes. The storytelling of these times are the very beginning of performing arts. Performing arts include dance, drama, theater, filmography, and television. As civilizations formed, storytelling evolved into theater and drama, but storytelling did not go away. One of the most famous storytellers, Homer, did not write the Odyssey. It was a story he told without ever writing it down. One of the earliest examples of theater is in ancient Greece around 500 BCE. These productions took place in big amphitheaters and served mainly religious purposes. The next major change in theater occurred during the Renaissance, when William Shakespeare wrote plays that expanded the dramatic potential of characterization, plot, language, and genre. His style had a strong influence on the future of performing arts. His most notable works include Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and The Tempest. While theater was much more accessible to more people than previous forms of entertainment, it was still limited to people living in large urban centers. This changed when the first motion picture camera was invented in 1890, marking the beginning of a new form of performing arts. The first uses of the motion picture camera was not for entertainment. It wasn't until 1897 when the first movie studio was built, 1905 when the first theater was built, and 1910 when actors were credited and paid for their roles. The most notable figure from the early stages of filmography was D.W. Griffith. He was sent to California to film a movie. There he filmed in Old California in a small village just outside of Los Angeles called Hollywood. And that's how Hollywood became the movie capital of the world we know today. Since then, the most important developments in film include sound, which was first used in the 1920s, color, first seen in the 1930s, digital effects, and the movies that helped perfect them. Nowadays, YouTube has allowed for people from all four corners of the globe to watch home and professional movies from their own home.
Another long-lasting form of entertainment through history has been sports and games, with cave paintings as far back as 15,000 BCE depicting them. One of the earliest sports was wrestling, which has been practiced all over the globe since before 10,000 BCE. For those who were looking for less physically demanding fun, new options arose at the dawn of the earliest civilizations, like board games such as the Royal Game of Ur, invented in Mesopotamia. Around this time, the Mesoamericans came up with one of the first ever ball games, known today simply as the Mesoamerican ball game. The basic concept of the game was to keep the ball in play, but it later evolved to include goals just like those found in modern games. However, it was often more than just a game. Loss in the game translated to a very real loss afterwards: human sacrifice. As time passed, sports became increasingly organized and regulated. For example, the Greek Olympics, which started in 776 BCE, were consistently held every 4 years in Olympia and consisted of many different events we still see today. This time period between 600 BCE and 600 CE is also tied to the rapid spread of new sports and games elsewhere in the world. For instance, chess in India, polo in Persia, and playing cards in Tang, China. In the following centuries, sports began to take the form of those of modern time. Golf, tennis, cricket, and hockey emerged. The later Columbian Exchange globalized games and sports between the Old and New World. By the 16th and 17th century, commercial games started to form with modern sets of rules. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, imperialism by the British Empire created a uniformity around the world in which games were played and how they were played. A great example of this unification was the 1904 foundation of FIFA, an international professional association dedicated to football. It was further 19th century technological advancements that made video games possible in the 1950s. Nowadays, sport and gaming has grown exponentially into a massive multi-billion-dollar industry, with sports and games, both new and old, being enjoyed everywhere.
And that brings us to literature. The dawn of literature goes all the way back to the invention of written language in Sumer at around 3600 BCE, where it was predominantly used for record keeping. One of the most famous epics of all time, the Epic of Gilgamesh, was written somewhere in between 2100 and 1400 BCE, and was one of the earliest examples of known literature not used for record keeping. For much of history, the ability to read was exclusive to religious figures and other elites. The earlier civilizations made advances in agriculture, the more people had free time to take part in literature. In the coming years, literature continued to evolve alongside new languages. From around 600 BCE to 600 CE, literature became even more important because many religions had scripture. More religious people was met with a higher literacy rate. During the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther transcribed the Bible from Latin into the vernacular, which pushed even more people to learn how to read. This point brings me into possibly the largest advancement in literature in all of history, the printing press. The printing press was first invented by the German Johannes Gutenberg in around 1440. His invention was an adaptation of earlier Chinese presses that made the process faster and more efficient. Later, movable type made printing presses faster because you could change the press for each page. In the late 1800s, the typewriter further sped up this process. In the late 1900s, the personal computer made it so that basically anyone could write and print out their own works. Since the invention of the printing press and its subsequent innovations, literacy rates throughout the world have skyrocketed. More and more genres of literature have arisen. Today, the best-selling book of all time is the Bible, with the Harry Potter series trailing in second.
Humans have been creating music since we first walked the earth. We can't help it, it's in our DNA. The first instruments were attached to us. The voice could sing, whistle, and hum, and the feet and hands could beat out a rhythm. Eventually, humans added instruments, the first of which were hollow sticks through which one blew to make sound, the precursor to woodwinds. Meanwhile, the first stringed instrument, an ancient Indian fiddle, came to be. Music and culture have always been intertwined to the point where music was referred to by the culture from which it originated, for instance, Persian music, Jewish music, etc. As eclectic as music was, though, the vast majority of lyrics were about religion. From BCE to the Renaissance era, cultures kept developing instruments like the lute and theorbo from raw materials and making music with them. Music as an art and science, however, didn't fully blossom until around 1600. The Baroque and Classical periods were the first rich and complex ones. The harpsichord, as the predecessor to the piano, was used for absolutely everything. This period inaugurated the European string orchestras, operas, and tone contrasts with which we're so familiar to this day, including Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Many previous instruments had fallen out of use and were replaced by their modern counterparts, like trumpets, clarinets, oboes, and the piano. Modern music in the 20th century started out with a popular syncopated style called ragtime, headed by Scott Joplin. The ballroom and Charleston dance decades of the 20s and 30s followed. America was moving from a classical melodical era into a realm of dance music such as jazz, ragtime, etc. After World War II, the vinyl record was introduced, so possessing and listening to pre-recorded music was easier than ever before. Les Paul's electric guitar, invented in 1939, was instrumental in the heavy, upbeat styles of rock and roll, R&B, classic pop, country, and rock. In the 60s, an eclectic rock group from the UK called the Beatles completely swept the charts in Europe and America, indicating rapid globalization. Then in the 80s, the emergence of computers led to new digital sounds. Today, this means teen pop, rap, and EDM, all available in the cloud. With these innovations, anything seems possible.
Since prehistoric times, innovations in technology have been essential in the evolution of entertainment. Constantly evolving transportation and communication has allowed for the spread of new and unique forms of entertainment to every culture and country in the world. This has resulted in the massive and incredibly diverse entertainment industry we see today, bringing joy to billions of people.